You could have heard this episode 48 hours early on our Patreon, patreon.com/indieheadspodcast. By joining us for as low as $1 a month, you will see episodes early and gain access to our Discord server. All of our upcoming episodes will be up on our Patreon 48 hours before it hits our public podcast feeds. But if you're hearing this via our Patreon feed, we thank you so much for your support. We especially want to thank our Real Ones patrons, including Becca Etienne, Georgia Mikowski, James Boss, Holiday Kirk, Tyler, Marcy Anime, Chance Bushelli, Dana Laney Miller, Rihanna Cruz, Josiah Duncan, Genoa Fleur, Matt Cameron, Grant in the Back of My Dragula, Pablo Escobar's Hippos, Jackson Christ, Alec Felder, Jeremy Bull, White Dogs Y, Matthew Taylor, Breen Hare, Drew Wharton, I Like Books, Jonathan David, Max Kapazinski, Mark Barry, Darian Fisher, Cal 50, Noah's Refused Pimped Out Dave Matthews Event, Chris Wade, Jacqueline Kataga, Midwest Maxwell, Kevin John, Jake Wald, Erase Ray Baby, Rob Marino, Max, Dylan, Sandy Nemo, Zach, Kevin 490 Freak, and Maze Farms. To become a real one, consider supporting us for $5 a month on Patreon. We'll receive a bonus episode every month, get a shout out at the top of the pod. Anyways, though, enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, this is part 2 of our Q4 2022 catch-up. This was recorded in one long marathon session, intending to be one standalone episode, but the episode was 3 hours long, so for the mercy of you all, I split into 2 parts, and this is part 2, as we still got plenty of more Q4 2022 discussion on the way, including a main event discussion on the new Weyes Blood record. So but that's the main event. That's the last record we talk about. So for the rest, let's just get back into it. Hit the theme song.
Yes. The Plains album, I Walk With You a Ways. I have a very controversial opinion on this that honestly I probably need to revise and revisit this, because I famously was not a St. Cloud person, and I felt like I was on an island because, I don't know, it probably was just that, like, that was super not what I was listening to.
I'm there with you.
It was super not what I was listening to at the time, and so I didn't really click with it then, and so I probably should go back to St. Cloud and like give it a real honest go again.
It's really
because I'm much more of a country listening person now than I was 2 years ago. And then but that's where I get to this take, which I feel some people have told me I am a moron for. But I think this is better than St. Cloud. I like this more than St.
You're
Cloud.
right.
It's good. I think it's good. I think that Hurricane is a better song than anything on St. Cloud. I also really, really like the other song. Hurricane wasn't the one that was
Problem
on,
with It.
Problem with It is the one that was on all the list. That one's really, really
Those
good.
are my two.
Hurricane is definitely my favorite on the record, but I just think this is just like really, really, really pleasant, and I think that I like solo Waxahachie more in the Out in the Storm lane. Like, that's my favorite record from her. But I think that Waxahachie and Jess together, like, their voices complement each other really, really well.
For sure.
And I think that this record is just real nice to listen to. Also, I love the album artwork. So gorgeous. I think it's great photography.
I totally agree with you, Jackie. I was not really a fan of St. Cloud, partially because I just like really like her earlier, fuzzier stuff. Like American Weekend is my favorite Waxahachie record. And I also was like, it's weird that she, up until St. Cloud, was not really singing with a Southern twang. And to the point that when I first listened to St. Cloud, I had to Google where she was from, and I was surprised that she was from Alabama, because I thought that, I was like, why does her Southern accent sound fake and cartoony? But it doesn't really bother me on this. I think a lot of that is because she has Jess Williams to kind of play off of, and I think their harmonies are really strong and they work really well together. And like, I think the alt country thing works a lot better on this record than it does on St. Cloud. I also like, I feel like this is such an outdoor record. Like the Knife Play album, like that's an indoor record. This one is very much like true to the name. Like I feel like I'm walking through a field of wheat when I listen to it.
I feel like, and that kind of is like the covers thing. The two album covers between St. Cloud and this one make them feel connected to me, and this feels like a kind of logical extension of. I love that album. I think that was one of my favorites of that year by far. And like the universe she's built out with like Great Thunder too, like as an EP, and this album, and even like Kevin Morby stuff tangentially kind of feels like it's part of the same thing. And I like this album a lot. I wrote down, this to me is Sunday morning brunch core. This is like you're gonna make pancakes and it's like pleasant, and you can listen to it as actively or passively as you want, and it kind of is good either way, you know. But
it's a nice thing to throw on.
And it's pretty inoffensive. Like I could play this for my parents; they'd be like, "Great, sweet."
One of the better NPR core records of the year.
Yeah.
I want them to cover that song "Wildflowers" that Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris did.
That would be really good. I just think for me, St. Cloud didn't have the songs. I probably have to go back to it, but like the ones that people say like, oh my god, that song on St. Cloud, like none of those ever really stuck with me.
I think I get
like,
that.
were memorable for me in that sort of way. And I think what Grace is saying, it's like, it's not that the Southern accent was like affected, but there's something about recontextualizing her voice within country music that all of a sudden makes that super duper noticeable. And like, she definitely does play. It's like when people from the South who have lost their accent go back to the South and are surrounded by people who are talking like that, all of a sudden it comes out of them and they don't even realize that they're doing it. Like it just sort of starts. I think that's sort of what happened to her.
Yeah, it felt very like
the shift
Phoebe
was
Bridgers.
jarring.
Why do you sing with an English accent? I guess it's too late to change it now, but she did change it.
That's funny. Anyways, let's move to the next record. This is the one that I like.
This new Fleshwater album, The Razor's Apple, another solid entry into the relatively new genre of butt gaze, is what I would call this record.
I
the combination of butt rock and shoegaze.
It's more new gaze. I would say.
That may be more accurate.
A massive win for Holiday Kirk getting cited on Pitchfork.com by Patrick Lyons in the great review of this record. But I think the main thing I liked about this record is that it came right off of the heels of Eli Ennis's thing he wrote about the grunge revival and how one of the biggest things that's sort of lacking from the current crop of bands trying to do grungy guitars and try to mixing that with shoegaze influences. Like a lot of these bands, and I actually saw a band that I won't name not too long after I read that Eli piece, that like Eli had this band fucking Dead to Rights, just like no energy, just like very like kind of mumbly frontman vibes.
Can you? I'll censor in post. What's this? Who's the band?
Maddie, I forget which one. It's one of the bands that opened for. I'll say it after the podcast.
Okay.
But
I think I have an idea. I think I have an idea.
But point being is just that like a lot of those bands are missing the sort of edge, and not necessarily edge in like an edgelord sort of way, but more like the like sexuality, the energy, the just like raw like going for itness that is not common from people now. You know what I mean? Like it's not a very like, there's not a lot of young people that are willing to just like really fucking go for it in that sort of like old school kind of rock star way. And this record has just like a ton of energy in a way that like them being a band that comes from heavier music towards making this, I think is why it works, because I think a lot of the time shoegaze bands try to add a little bit of grunge heaviness and end up making really kind of like limp grunge music, versus a band that can crank things all the way up to super fucking heavy, intentionally scaling it back a bit, but then being able to take it up a step whenever they need to do a nasty breakdown on this record. Like they have that gear in them, but they also are writing way more. And I didn't really love the Vane album this year at all. Like I was really into the first Vane album, and the new one like didn't do it for me. So I was really, really pleasantly surprised with, I mean, more bands to do metal Bjork covers. That's just like a slam dunk.
Yes.
Especially songs from Post. Oh my god, that's so sick. And then my favorite song on the album, Woohoo, said, I made this joke on Twitter, but it sounds like Evil Pool Kids. It's so good.
Love that. No, I love this album a lot, and like this is definitely. I just wrote down "Sickos." Yes, that's like my only note for this one.
100%.
Like this is my
head
shit.
empty riffs, great. It's just
yeah. And sometimes that's all you need.
I love about having really gotten into Deftones this year. I was just like perfectly primed to enjoy.
That's a great comparison. Yeah, like it does, and it even gets like kind of screamy in the same way. Again, like the like dialing it back is that's a great observation, I think.
Yeah.
And this one, I don't know. The only thing I wanted to also talk about was like I think a week or two later, Soulblind also released an album. Who's kind of like I just view these two as like joined at the hip as well, where I was like rotating them both a lot, and they're both kind of like that grungy, hardcore gaze shit for and they're just kind of that energy when you need that. I don't know. I really dug this album, and it is what it is. Not everyone's gonna dig this, but it does it well.
Yeah. Good record. Good record. Very much a part, I would say, of that, sort of this recent sort of American shoegaze wave. That's just, again, there's a lot of different sides of the spectrum. That you have stuff, the more new gaze stuff like this. You have the stuff that's just like more bonkers, like Tagabo. Some of the more slower core stuff, like Knife Play.
Yeah, this
and
is
then
very
you're
much
you're sort of
Hum Diamond Eyes school is sort of it's like Diamond Eyes, Deftones, and Hum feel like the two shoegaze touch points for this. In addition to obviously the new metal stuff going on here and their sort of hardcore background.
Yeah, and a band that I think I listened to in the office the other day that I really want to get more into is Blue Smiley, which I feels like a band that was way ahead of the curve of the stuff right now. Like a lot of the shoegaze bands, especially the Philly bands, are like, we're like it's Blue Smiley, like that's who we're aping essentially. But yeah, let's move on. This is one that again, Jackie, you're again, you're no longer you're technically no longer working this band. You can say your thoughts.
Yes, no, this is hard for me because it's like when you're the publicist for something, people just assume you're doing it because it's your job. But I can
lead.
Band.
I can lead. This new, I'll lead, Jackie, just in case. This new Shutups album, I can't eat nearly as much as I want to vomit. Great punk band out of Oakland. Is that are they Oakland?
They're based out of Oakland.
On Kill Rock Stars. This is just again really incredibly catchy, hooky, sort of like vaguely post-punk, vaguely noise rock, indie rock type stuff. Again, this is just a really just is the band is good at writing the songs. They're just the band all good songs here.
Yes.
Again, obviously Jackie put me onto this band because they were doing Publicity, and then I ended up doing the radio campaign for them. But yeah, this is just a fucking all killer, no filler, just noise rock, indie rock, post punk record, and just fucking sick. Great title too. That you're gonna hear a lot throughout the album.
I like the way they
the running motif.
Yes, it's really cool. If you I got very into this band once I sort of started working with them, but then it just sort of became like very naturally, like they were my second most listened to artist of this year, and that's not counting all the times I listened to this album before it came out via the advanced stream. So I spent a lot of time listening to this band this year, and I think they are so special and fun, and I really grown to love Hadley as a songwriter, but also the specific chemistry. And yes, I was their publicist. I am friends with them. They are nice, lovely people. Bud is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. Like I am in the can.
Bud is so cool.
Band. Putting all of those things aside, putting aside that I'm very much in the can for this band, I think that they do sort of indie punk. Like it's very much of the sort of pup, like kind of, but also kind of Mannequin Pussy, kind of not pop punk, but like punk pop, sort of combining like classic West Coast melodic punk music with a very Weezer Blue album sort of sense of like riffy melodic leaning music, like, and then what the really cool evolution that they've taken. So they put out their first record in 2019, Every Day I'm Less Zen, which is just sort of like
such a good album,
an amazing album, but also is like more straightforward. Like it's just banger after banger after banger. And then since then, they started working on this new album, which got delayed because of the pandemic and how complicated making it was. So basically, the order of making their music was that they made the first album, and then they wrote most of the songs for the second album, and then they made all of the EPs while they were finishing the second album, because they took like all of the files for this album to Jack Shirley, and Jack Shirley was like, Jesus Christ, this is a mess, like there's so much going on here, and he managed to make it all work. But this album is like, Hadley said he was very inspired by Girl Talk. He's like, Girl Talk rewrote my brain and also satisfied my ADHD need for like constant shifts and changes and like hooks every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And this is the record of theirs that like reflects that ethos across a whole album. It like with the running motifs and the songs that have like 3 or 4 different parts in them, like it just feels like one continuous record while also having these really well-defined songs, like capital S songs. I've also described this band as like, what if Joyce Manor, but what if like Barely March knew how to like structure a song? Not Barely March, Barry Johnson. What if Barry Johnson?
Barely Johnson.
Like, no, but we talked about before, like Barry Johnson's secret superpower.
Small dick, they call me Barely Johnson.
Barry Johnson's superpower is that he doesn't know how to write a song normal, and that's what makes everything about him great. Like we that's no shots at Barry Johnson, but this is like,
no, we love him.
A much more,
I mean, hey, I got a tattoo.
A much more kind of like very. This album reminds me of the Foxing album a lot, in that it's this band kind of just like going for broke and like really swinging for the fences with these, and a lot of these like big songs that build, and all these different like indie rock influences that they're blending into, for Foxing emo, but for Shutups sort of indie punk, and like just putting all this other stuff into the soup and wanting to make something that is partly an album about like, it is an album that feels self-aware about like, not the way that the Pup album was, where it's like self-flagellating, but more like it's really hard trying to be a band, and it's kind of a futile mission that we're on, but also like finding the sort of like purpose in that anyways, and being like, this is what we want to do. And like I just really love it. I've come back to it a lot since it came out, since before, like it just has stayed with me, and this band has become one of my favorites. I highly recommend checking out the EPs as well for anyone that hasn't, between the 2 records, because that is technically the newest material they've written as far as Hadley's songwriting. Like the actual songs themselves on this new album were sort of produced and put together and assembled over a very, very long period of time. Like some of these songs date back to like 2016, like from the very beginning of this band. So it's really kind of a sort of their whole band up to this far sort of definitive statement. But the EPs have a lot of other really interesting, cool stuff going on in them that suggests possible ways that the band could go next, like Shit Opus, which is this 4-part song that has a nu metal riff in the middle of it. It's so sick. And also Death from Behind, which is one of their catchiest songs ever from the 5 EP. They're just like a great band. They haven't put out a bad EP or album yet. It's all good. You should listen to it. I'm a big fan of theirs.
They're so good at sequencing, like especially on this album. I feel like
100%.
It's just, they're so masterful at putting together a track list. The 3-song run of like World to 100 Punk to Endless Heaven is just so perfect. I also feel like every time I talk about Shutups, I end up sounding like Dave Grohl talking about Wet Leg, where he's like, yeah, they're like a band and they have guitars and bass and drums and they're really good at playing their instruments. But like they just are really good at playing their instruments.
100%. No, that's exactly it. Like it totally is like, but it isn't at all like we were just talking about Black Keys and stuff. It is not at all retro looking or like stuck in the past. That's what makes it really great, is that they do this very kind of classic, in a way that's very different from the sort of Motober second grade school of power pop. It's much more of a Weezer fuzzy 90s.
Like GBV.
Yeah,
GBV
like, also this album at a lot of times, and someone compared it, one of the press hits we got for Endless Heaven made this comp, and I hadn't thought about it, but like Pablo Honey Radiohead is kind of a vibe that I get from this album a lot, in a good way. Yeah. As someone who finally came around on Pablo Honey being good, actually, long into my Radiohead fandom, like I just really love this kind of 90s rock music, and I think that they do it in a way that feels very like Spirit of the Beehive, in the way that they're sort of mashing them up,
like
and
deconstructing.
Like, exactly, but while keeping having these really, really, really strong hooks at the center of every song. That's really like what guides you through it. They're awesome. I love this band, and check out this record if you haven't, because it came out the same day as the Taylor Swift record. So like, some people you might have missed it. You might have missed it by chance, but it's a really great record. And also shout out, by the way, while we're just mentioning the drums on this record. Oh gosh, she's so fucking good at drumming.
I was gonna say, I want to mention something really quick. The drums are great. One of the great things about this band is that they have the famous band trope of every band member looks like they're in a different band.
Yes, it's so great.
You got Hadley, little short king Hadley.
If you've never looked them up, just go to their Instagram and look at the recent press photos that Sophie has done for the band. They are just so incredibly like dramatically different vibes, but all of them have been childhood. So the three guys in the band have been childhood friends their whole life. And Mia and Hadley met in college and formed the band together, and then the other two guys joined in later. So like it's a really, really tight-knit group, and they have just like a really great chemistry. But yeah, it's also like there are some bands where it's like, oh, you are all 5 variants on the same person. Like bands where it's just like, oh, you're all a type of guy and you all found each other and you commiserate over your shared type of guyness, where this is more like the Breakfast Club, where it's like, how did you meet? How do you know each other? How does this work? Like, it seems at times like they shouldn't work as a band because they have such different personalities and skills that they bring to it, but that's kind of the magic of it. But yeah, Mia is an incredible fucking drummer. So good. Eric is a great bassist and synth player, and also does all of their videos. And I mean, Eric does guitar and synth, not bass. And then Bud is their bassist, and Bud is like, I tell people, if you were writing a movie about a band and you wanted to have like a comic relief character, and you gave that comic relief character real dialogue, real things that Bud has said to me, you'd be like, that's too on the nose. You've got to like, you've got to dial this back like 30%. Like Bud is just the most like of a character person I've ever met. Like you can tell this man spent some time in Chico, California. Shout out to Bud. I love Bud.
Bud, I gotta smoke a blunt with Bud so bad.
Oh yeah, that was the other great thing about this band, is that the first time I got to see them play live, I smoked weed that Hadley's dad grew in his house.
Hell yeah!
So cool band, love them very much. Also, the other last thing I'll say is that the Weezer comp. I like to say that like Hadley is like if Rivers was not normal, but like if Rivers Cuomo was like less off-putting, is how I describe Hadley to people. Like if Rivers Cuomo knew how to be a functional human being, is kind of what I think of as Hadley. Like he's great. I love him.
Yeah. Let's move on then. I say because they're all different members. They have Hadley, little jester boy Hadley, short king. Mia is just looks like the coolest person ever. Eric kind of looks like Tony Khan from AEW. And then
Eric
Bud
looks like Chad Will Toledo. Is what Eric looks like.
that too. And then Bud is just Bud. Again, if you saw a photo of this guy and you had to guess his name, Bud is like gonna be your top option.
Top of the list for sure.
He looks like a Bud. But let's move on to our next record.
Another one I really liked.
Yeah, this one we kind of briefly touched on earlier. This new Lowertown album, I Love to Lie, released on Dirty Hit. Jackie put me onto this record because I heard their last album. That the Gaping, or their last EP, I should say, it was an EP, The Gaping Mouth, which I was like, okay, not for me. But this record is just like a total 180 of like, wow, this band they're doing some cool, interesting stuff here that I really enjoy. But you have a little more to say than I do on this record, Jackie.
This is just like a really, really great. I put you onto this because I knew you would like it. I also listened to their first record, and yeah, there's definitely some like hints at it, but it's like there's a lot of stuff going on in this band that wasn't quite gelling together, and I was definitely getting like hints of it. I was like, all right, there's some elements here, but I'm not quite seeing how this congeals, and it's not like they sort of found a lane. I think this record, if anything, is like way more scattered than the last one, but in a way that just works really well, where all of a sudden I get what this band is going for, which is that like the first 5-song run, or the first 6-song run through No Way, it's a little bit of a front-loaded record, But the first 6-song run is like this incredible thing where it just is slingshotting back and forth between like manic post-punk and like folky indie, like singing, like very, very like pretty sort of like it's like if you put like Priest and Lamelda at like two opposite ends of like an indie rock spectrum, and it's like running in between them back and forth in a way that the real miracle of this record is that it doesn't lose you. Is that when it jumps from song to song, you expect that it's gonna like just throw you out of the groove that you're in, but it's pretty well sequenced. And even the end of the record, like where this record does things that I like, having the end of the album be like this waltz and A flat major track and like these weird kind of ballady tracks at the end, like it just has a lot of things that seem like it should like shoot this album in the foot, and all of it just works. Like all of it is, and it makes it such an interesting listen because it's got so much like personality and so much going on, but it's also just got like a couple of really fucking great songs. Like Antibiotics and Bucktooth are both like really, really damn good singles, and really show like a range that this band I did not think had based on the first record, and just makes me like really excited. And also, speaking of beefing with Matty Healy, promote this damn band better, Matty Healy's label, because they have not gotten the love that I think they should have for this record. Partly because it's just like October was just insane. Like as someone who, this album came out the same day as the Shutups album, came out the same day as the Taylor Swift album, came out.
I think it's a week after. I think it's a week. I think it's a week after.
October 21st. October, same day.
I thought October 14th was the Taylor Swift Shutups day.
Was Matty. I worked.
Oh, it was late. Yeah, okay, now I remember.
I know what day. It came out
okay, sorry, I got it mixed up. My bad.
No. But like, I didn't get to it till a month later because of that reason. Like, October was just like insane. Everyone was trying to make the get your homework in deadline for album of the year season, and it was just a stupid crunch in which music journalists were just too busy to cover everything that was coming out. But if you didn't check out this Lowertown album, highly recommend it. Cool band.
I'm not one of the I'm not like top 5, top 10 song of the year. Like that's just
I'm not
such an incredible song. I played on which in case I didn't put anything up on our Spotify feeds or whatever. I just kind of, if you're on our Patreon or our Twitter, I did a radio show I did an end of year radio show that I put up on our Patreon that you can either listen to the top 10 albums version, just the short version for $1. You can go $5 a month and get the full over 2-hour radio show, me talking my favorite records of the year, including this Lowertown album, and played a couple tracks. But yeah, really great record. The thing is that this record I haven't done like a full run through in like a month because I'll start to do it and I'll just get to I'm Not. I'm like, I just want to keep listening to I'm Not because I'm Not is incredible. I think I would say like this is definitely not a 1-to-1 comparison, but if you really like that Jockstrap album from this year, I feel like this is operating on like a fairly similar wavelength.
It just
it reminded me a lot of the Feeble Little Horse album.
Yeah, that's a really good comp.
That's a good comp.
Maybe because I listened to it for the first time after listening to that Feeble Little Horse album and then seeing Feeble Little Horse, but that was like the very similar vibes it was giving me, that kind of like fuzzy 90s like often far away sound.
This is one that I had to skip just by process of like trying to catch up and re-listen to everything, but you guys have convinced me now. I'm gonna go listen to it after this. So
yeah, you gotta listen.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think
you're really digging Taylor.
Is a good comp because the Feeble Little Horse album similarly feels like
that's cool.
Very, very giddy in the way it's kind of jumping around from idea to idea. Like, look at all this cool stuff we can do. It's got that same sort of vibe to it.
Definitely.
But yeah, let's move on to our next record, the new SZA album, SOS. SZA's not for me. I'm a white guy.
My thoughts are pretty short. It's good. Death to 25 song albums.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's basically it. Like SZA just should have put out like a 7 or 8 song album 2 years ago, and then put out a normal length album now, or just put out a shorter album now and then drop an EP in like 6 months and call it B-sides, whatever. Like,
or just do a fucking Radiohead, Amnesiac, today thing where it's like you going.
Yeah, exactly. Like any of the, it's not like she didn't have 25 good songs. Like most of the songs reach a a certain level of competence. It kind of gets back to the Phoebe Bridgers sort of lyricism conversation, where she's a similar sort of figure for R&B, where and that's why I think actually, at first I was like, what the fuck, Phoebe Bridgers on the SZA album, but then as I thought about it more, like, it made a lot of sense to me. And I think I want to pull up the actual tweet, but my friend Fabiola had a really funny tweet about how SZA tweets things that are like very pretty straightforward, like relationship things, and then the girlies tweet felt in all caps with like a million emojis. And like, you know what, like, it's so basically my response was like, A, you're so right, but also sometimes I am the girlies saying felt. So, you know, who am I to judge is basically how but like I really liked F2F was like the song I was like shocked by on this record, because that song sounds like Taylor Swift almost to me. Like, it's this really kind of like almost pop punky, like almost rock sort of song from her that was like so unexpected and cool. And I really like a lot of the record besides that, but I just think
I feel like that's what a lot of the like mainstream pop punk that's happening now like wants to sound like.
100%.
Like, I'm like, oh, is this what people who listen to Willow think that the Willow record sounded like?
No, so true. So true.
Or like, I don't know, just like that whole onslaught of like TikTok pop punk, like the post Olivia Rodrigo.
It's not trying too hard to be Avril Lavigne. That's why it works. It feels comfortable.
It feels natural to her.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was like I was trying not to be let down by this album because I loved Control. Like, that was one of my favorite albums of 2017. That was an album that was like one of the definitive albums of my college years. And I think I thought that album was a lot shorter than it was. It feels really compact. And then I looked at it the other day and I was like, wait, this album is almost an hour long. Like, then why does SOS feel like it takes forever? Like, in comparison. And I was trying to go into it being like, okay, I know you waited almost 5 years or more than 5 years from like this really great album, but you have to see it as its own thing. But I don't know. I feel like there was just like, there's some killer, a lot of filler. Yeah. And I think, you know, I will probably at some point do like a chop down playlist of like the songs that are keepers on that one. But I don't know. It's just like, there's a lot to wade through on that one. And it feels a lot slower than her past stuff.
I think so.
And just like,
I think crowded. That's what you're saying about the first record. I think the first record is kind of long. I think just what happens with it is that like over time, the songs that you forget are on that record just sort of fade out of your memory, and you only think about the ones that just like are so good that you like. That is a really front-loaded record where like the run of like Supermodel is such a great intro, and then like the whole Prom, Drew Barrymore, The Weeknd, Go Gina run is like fucking unbelievably good. And then you're just like, wow, that record is so great. And you're like, wait, also Normal Girl and 20-something are songs that exist, I guess. Like, that's kind of like, but like this has a much more dramatic effect of that, where it feels like it feels like she put out the deluxe version as the first album. Like, I hope to God there is not a deluxe version.
I think she's teased that.
I think there is.
Yeah, I think she's teased that's coming.
God, maybe. It's just streaming bloat is out of control.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not like all these songs. It's not like there's a lot of like, oh, obviously this song should be cut. Like, I get why she felt like some of these needed to be saved, or that she had a lot to say, because I think she did. It's just that like you could put that other stuff spaced out on something else. Exactly. Like, there's just no thought to like how it flows as a record.
I think Control had a much clearer arc as a record.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I feel like it's much more amorphous on SOS.
Yeah, the exact tweet from my friend Fabiola was, SZA will say some generic love stuff like, I hate that I love you, and all the girls will be like, felt, clap, 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 100, 100, 100, exclamation points. It's true.
Also, Blind, great song. Blind's a great song.
Blind's a really great song too. Yeah, there's a lot of, it's like, there is a good SZA album somewhere in here.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's my thoughts as well.
I also think that it came out at the wrong time of the year. Like, I mean, this is not a winter album.
I'll say it. It can be said a million times. Like, you don't even have to wonder, is Top Dog gonna fuck up the rollout of one of their artists, because it's you can count on it like the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. Like, yeah, like of course they bungled the rollout. It's Top Dog. That's what they do.
Speaking of albums that probably should have come out a little later or come out next year or should have come out earlier.
I think you're right. It's
again,
always
December. Here's December. I just want to say, obviously, this is me, being privileged, being a music industry person, someone who has access to advances and work stuff in the industry. If you're an artist releasing in December, that's your fucking death. Hey, that's your fucking funeral. Yeah. That's why I fucking hate these stupid Indieheads commenters being like, the year's not over yet. Why are the people putting out their list already? It's because if you're an artist that you're putting your record out in December, that's your funeral. Hey, you might be obviously you're operating in a much less busy time of the year. More eyes on your more eyes on your record, but also like you're not really gonna be on that mini list. Yeah. It's this case. I agree
with you, Matty. I totally agree with you. I will just say the problem is not the reason why I actually do think the sort of why do you listen to December thing. It's just like, it's dumb, but also it's because music journalists and music people and publicists all want like a month off where we don't have to do shit.
Exactly.
And no one wants to have to catch up on music that came out during that time. So it's a little bit just like us all being lazy, but a little bit of it is also like, you're right. Like, people are just home for the holidays. It's like, unless you are a really big, like, it is a real
unless
gamble.
You're a SZA, where SZA can get away to December.
It's almost like a flex if you're a big enough artist who can drop something in December.
Playboy
if you're
Cardi
like Playboy Cardi and
exactly. Cardi, I think Beyonce did a December release for her self-titled.
And it worked so well for Playboy Cardi because everyone listened to that album because everyone was like, well, there's not a bunch of other new stuff coming out and I like this artist and it was a big album. So like it can pay off, but I don't think that's happened with the Little Simz record, which is what we're talking about right now.
Well, that record also, I feel like, didn't she confirm that she has another album coming out in 2023? Yeah. And so that album seemed very much like this is the interim record to hold everyone over until like she can drop what she's been waiting to drop.
It's also thematically appropriate because this album is her like fuck the music industry. They love to give you a trophy and then like spit you right back out and like not give a shit about you. And that's like kind of the thesis of this record. It's called No Thank You. So I think Lil Simz would tell you, Maddie, no thank you. I'll do what I want, basically.
I mean, again, it's this case. It's like, again, I think Lil Simz is someone who's like obviously not as big as SZA, but is a big enough artist with a stronger fan base where it's like they can get away with it. They don't rely on the press outlets as much as some other artists do.
Yeah.
Like they have a strong locked in fan base from the last, their previous two records.
You are right though, that this had it felt like there was less of a moment around this than there has been of the last couple, just because she was someone that did so well with press. That's just more the argument. It's not like, it's just like, if you want your record to really, really pop, like you are someone that has such a press acclaim, like winning all these awards and stuff. Like she won the Mercury Prize for her last album. Like you could have just gotten on. Like it would have been such a slam dunk on so many end of year lists if she had put it out a month earlier. But she doesn't care about that. And you know what? Respect.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I mean, do we have any thoughts on No Thank You? I didn't have a whole lot. I've never really been that big on the Little Simz train. This record didn't really convince me per se. To hop on that train.
I really liked her first record, and I like songs on every one of her records. I wasn't as into like the production on the last record. I like this one a little more than the last record. I think it's a little more like kind of back to basics and a little more like gray area than like the real big like pomp and circumstance of the last record. But she's more of a songs artist than an albums artist for me.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Fair. Let's move on. The new Drowse album, Wane into it. Jackie. Yeah. I wonder if Jackie has things to say about this album.
I do. In fact, you can read things I have to say about this record over on merry-go-round-magazine.com. So I will try not to blabber about this record too much. However, it's really, really, really good. it's one that I've continued to go back to, especially as I was talking about with the Knife Play record. Once it finally got cold and wet and dreary in California, this record started hitting at like 2x power. Because this is one of the most Portland albums of all time. Even though
shout out Portland.
Even though Kyle made this, actually, it's funny enough, Kyle made this record mostly in California because he is a Cal Arts PhD student now, which is how he knows the people in Sprain. I saw Drowse play with Cold God and Sprain, and then at the end of the Drowse show, he played with Sprain as his backing band for Blue Light Glow and one other song, and it was so sick. I really loved how this record sounded heavier live, but it just occupies the zone of like folk music stuff that I really, really love, and like slowcore, shoegazy stuff mixed with a very electronic music sensibility in terms of how it's constructed. Like, he name drops 106 Point Never's Replica by name, and as we talk about in the interview, like, that's a really, really huge record for him, not only as far as getting him into sort of DAW work and like electronic style production, but also like thematically, like what that album is doing, because like this being an album that's very much meditating on the Pacific Northwest while not being made there adds to this whole like memory, like copy of a memory sort of feeling that this record sort of has, and like the album cover being this weird hazy picture, and the way he described it in the album is feeling like it's like adjacent to our world, but like not necessarily of our world, kind of this weird spirit world record vibe. I love this record so much. I think Mystery Part 2 is one of the best songs of the year, and was really an eye-opening moment for me with Drowse, because I liked the other Drowse stuff I had heard before this, and I've since gone back and really dug into Light Mirror and the other stuff, but that stuff is like hazier in a way that this record still is, but there are these moments in the record where like the fog clears and you have these really like warm, really just like open finger-picked guitar sections that are just like so fucking gorgeous. And when I first heard that song, I was like, wait a second, like I had just sort of realized for the first time that there's been this big void in my music history, my music listening diet, since I stopped being a Sun Kill Moon obsessive, and this record is scratching that itch for me, not in terms of the songwriting, because it's very different obviously in a lot of ways, but like that those beautiful little just like fingerpick sections on Mystery Part 2 and elsewhere in this record, it just does so much stuff that's up my alley, and it really feels like the best work Kyle has done to this far. It's just a really, really excellent record that is only going to hit harder as things get colder and drearier. Like, this is just I think Patrick Lyons was the one who said like, this is a new Hall of Fame, it's getting dark outside really early album. Like, that is the vibes,
and that's Portland too.
It's so good.
Yeah, I dig this just from the perspective of anytime like there's a Portland artist, I'm just like, I inherently support them because that's where I'm from, that's where I'm recording this right now. But like, yeah, I think that the fog clearing, like, that's just, it's funny how much of what you're describing is just kind of like innate to the Pacific Northwest and how well that's captured on the record.
Totally, yeah. Go read my interview. I have more thoughts.
Interview's good.
I'll save it for elsewhere.
Yeah. Next record, this new brakence album, Hypochondriac. This is another one that Jackie kind of put me on to. This is a record that the way to describe this record.
I heard it in the office at the same time you did. I forget who. Really? Who was it that put it on? I think it was Zach.
It might have been Zach.
It wasn't, because I brought it up, and I think Zach. Who was it that put it on? Wasn't no.
I think it might have been you. I could have swore it was you. Like, we were talking about it, and you decided you hadn't heard it, but you're like, let's listen to this.
Okay, maybe that's what I think it might have, because I think it was right around the time that the Pitchfork review came out. I really like this and was surprised how much I like this. Not that I'm someone that's like averse to things that can be vaguely and poorly described as hyperpop, but as Matty identified, I think Matty, this is I've thought about this ever since you said it. This album, more than any other album this year, is riding the line between good and bad for every second of this album in the most compelling way. Like, it is truly, like, there are a lot of records I've heard that the entire time I'm like, well, this is very competent and nice, but there's not a lot that's interesting here. This is like, it's a arresting listen, and it is teetering on it, but it also never, it's like, it really works for me. Like, I kept expecting, like, oh no, he's doing what I usually don't like, and it doesn't put me off all the way, but there are times when I'm more into it than others. Like, I think 5G particularly is the best song on the record. That song is so good, I cannot stop listening to it. And I also really like Intellectual Greed is really good, and Stung. Actually, I've honestly, like, as I keep coming back to it, more songs keep clicking with me. And I think it does a lot of stuff that I usually find so obnoxious that I think he pulls off very well. Like, the whole kind of, it's very much of a piece with all the pop albums that came out last year, because it's like a very I Don't Like Being Famous album. It's a very like person grappling with their newfound success and the expectations that are put on them, but it's doing it in a way that never quite puts me off all the way, and also is so like exciting and creatively vibrant that like you buy into his whole kind of he's like simultaneously like inflating his own ego while also being like, I'm kind of a piece of shit, but in a way that like works. I don't know, like, it could so easily be like very contrived, and it does at times feel like he's gripping the steering wheel really tight on this record, and there's so much like effort and like energy being put into all of it in a way that feels like it should be off-putting in a try-hard way. Like, I kept thinking about XXX Tentacion when I was listening to this record, who was someone I never got into, was never, not even out of like a moral superiority sort of thing, more just like I found it to be too much in a way that was grating to me, and I like music that is too much. Like, I'm very on board with that hypothetically, but I think a lot of the time it can just be like a lot of sound and noise signifying nothing type stuff, and I think this record is not that. I think it's really intense and a little overbearing and potentially like suffocating at times, but only because of how much it's really straining to push itself forward and be as creative and well honed as possible. And it's just a really good pop record, like just a lot of really great hooks and vocal. Maddie, when you point out that he sounds like Post Malone, I kind of can't unhear that.
That's what I wrote. I was like,
I feel like
he sounds like Sam from She.
Hyperpop Post Malone essentially is brakence. That's not a bad way.
I like it a lot more than I did.
Yeah,
because I appreciate the risks that he takes, but I feel like what got in the way of me really enjoying the record was like he would do something just really fucking unique and cool on the production side of things, and then over that he would just say like the cringiest shit ever. In like I
said,
really whiny vocal delivery.
The tightrope is so thin with this record.
I don't think that works for everybody either too.
And he put this album, he's like, what, 2021? It was very much the kind of thing where I was like, you're doing a lot of stuff here that like there's a high likelihood that you're going to be embarrassed of it in 5 years.
Yes.
And like, I appreciate like the big swings, and I feel like he's someone where I'm like, I could see myself really liking your second or third album, but this one I feel like the whole like the persona that he puts on, he leans like, I felt like it didn't feel fully sincere or satirical. Like, I'm thinking of the Underscores record from 2021. Specifically the song Spoiled Little Brat, which feels very satirical, and like I love that song, and I feel like it totally leans into the like I'm a really messed up pop star and I'm all fucked up because everyone gives me everything I want but I never get what I need. And I feel like that was the vibe on the Brakence record, but like it didn't feel like it wasn't enough to either make me feel genuinely bad for him or be like, oh, this is a really cutting satire, or
it's
and like
more
meta
self-aware than some other people that try to like. It's more self-aware than like a Post Malone or like someone like that. But it's also not tongue-in-cheek. It's like pretty sincere.
Yeah,
he's trying. He's kind of trying to have his cake and eat it too. And for whatever reason, it totally worked on me, and I was shocked at how well it worked on me. Like you having this reaction is like how I expected to feel about it. He is a fuckboy. Like, he's a fuckboy, but he's a fuckboy.
Oh, yeah. Well, no,
he's the fuckboy in the way that I would date him, you know? Like, it's like, you're annoying, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, it was definitely like, this is a man that I dated in college for a week who would just be like, oh, I'm so fucked up. Like, it was, I feel like I almost wanted it to be, like, funnier.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, I wanted to laugh with him and not at him.
I get that. It is very taking itself seriously in that sort of way.
Yeah.
I do.
It very much feels like it's made by someone who is 20 years old.
100%. And is someone that will probably. I agree. Probably has his best music ahead of him. But yeah, it is understand. Like I very much. I think that's why I'm kind of willing to give it the slack, because it is like. This guy, he's barely 20-something and is putting out an album on Columbia Records. This is a fucking major label record, and he's going to have a lot of scrutiny on him, even more so than he's already had. And sort of this feeling that he has on the record, like the whatever, like can't stop producing heat or whatever. You want to like roll your eyes at him, but it's literally, it's like he's just a nerd from Ohio. Like he seems like he has LA brain, but he doesn't quite.
Most normal Ohio musician, brakence.
Yes, but because he's not,
speaking of,
like stuck in that sort of whatever. He's not like in LA in that way, but like I do think I understand how he feels, because he's just like, I was so like obsessive about making these beats and doing all this stuff and like finding a way to express myself, and now all of a sudden I'm like this major label's new hot thing, and like feeling the weirdness of that. Like I totally get why he's a little all over the place now, and I think it is probably a good document of where he is at his career, even though that also entails all of the parts about this that can be very off-putting for understandable reasons.
And it definitely stands out from the like barrage of very samey like post 100 gecs hyper pop.
100%. Yeah.
Which I respect, because I feel like it would have been so easy to just like go that route.
Yeah. It does a lot of the incorporation of like noodly emo stuff really, really well.
I like that.
I love intellectual the way Intellectual Greed starts with that like noodly riff, but then like breaks into like a pop punk thing, like similar to like how we were talking about how like what people think Willow sounds like. That's how I feel about that song. But yeah, 5G is the best song on the record. Like putting the noodly emo riff with the vocal that is constantly like he's swinging back and forth between the two different pitches, and the way that the super auto-tuned vocals are like just sort of like swinging back and forth over this drill beat and like emo guitars. It kind of reminds me of that Jim Legacy song DJ that people were really hyping up earlier this year. It's just really cool. I haven't heard anything like this, and I think that it has me into this guy and excited to see what he does next.
Yeah. But speaking of Most Normal, the new Gilla Band album, Most Normal, is next up on the docket. Of course, I've been a big Gilla Band, FKA girl band fan for quite some time now. Of course, their debut record, Holding Hands with Jamie, one of my favorite albums of the 2010s. And I was also a big fan of their last record, The Talkies. But The Talkies was definitely a very purposely difficult record. Just the fact that, like, you know, the lack of pronouns in the lyrics is a much more heady, kind of almost studio driven record. They literally like basically recorded it in like a haunted mansion, and the record feels like a haunted mansion. But this record feels like in some ways kind of like a back to basics in a sense, but also but doing so but while taking the lessons of the last album, where it's just sort of like a band that is like, all right, or just we're freeing ourselves from the restraints of like, okay, oh shit, we have to play the songs live. It's like, you know, when they were putting this record together, you know, during the pandemic rule, you know, the lockdown rules in Ireland and UK were just like 4 people in a room. They're like, all right, perfect. You know, they just hung out in the rehearsal space and just felt really inspired and put together a really great frenetic noise rock record that kind of has that spirit of the debut, but also a lot of the ambition of the talkies. It feels like a best of both worlds. And this is a record that at first, when I first started, when I got the advance, I was kind of like, oh, this kind of, it underwhelmed me. But then, once it actually came out and I just listened to it more, I'm like, oh wow, this might be their best album they've made yet, potentially.
I think it's their best for sure. I really, really, really love this record. Speaking of BJ Burden, this album reminds me so much of the BJ Burden Low records, where it's not just utilizing really harsh noise, but it's about the way that like those walls of noise are then clipped at super hard rate angles. Like it will go from like full level like harsh noise to absolutely dry as a fucking bone, no noise, no distortion, just like a really simple drum beat and this guy doing like spoken word vocals, and the way that those dynamics are treated as like a seesaw that the album is constantly sort of like, I think it's their best record for sure. I really, really love it. The best host-gearing music of 2022, I would say. Especially post Ryan, the last song on the record is, I think, my favorite Gilla band song ever, because like the last record is really intense, really, really, really intense in a way that I admire, but in a way that makes it a tough sit as a listen. And it's not like this album is any less abrasive, but the headspace of the frontman is very different, where like the first song on the talkies literally starts with him having a panic attack on microphone. Like literally it's as like intimate, like he's like hyperventilating and you're like, Jesus Christ, this is like a lot to take in. He's kind of like disaffected on this album in a way that really works, because it doesn't feel like he's disinterested, but it just sort of feels like he's Joker-fied. You know what I mean?
This is one of the most Joker-fied records of the past couple of years.
Which is why post Ryan is the best closer, one of the best closers of the year, because the whole sentiment of post Ryan, he's like, I'm in recovery. Like he's announcing it like, I'm in recovery, I've fixed, and then he goes, I'm just the same prick, and it's just that over and over and over again, and it's like.
And post Ryan is like very devastating, because it's just sort of like, it's this very like,
it's devastating, but also hilarious. Like
absolutely.
I think this more than any of their records strikes that balance perfectly between the pretension and the sort of thrilling fun of it, between the real intensity of it, but also the sort of tongue in cheek humor and all of that stuff. Like I just think it's really their best record by a lot. I really love it.
Yeah. It just seems like he's just Dara's in like a much better place like mentally, but still dealing with shit. I mean, like
also I love what's the name of the song? The second song where he's just listing all the different places where he went to go buy his ghost. I went to Aldi.
I think it's 8 fivers.
Yeah, 8 fivers. Yep, that's the
8 fivers. Yeah, I feel like that reminded me of like Pairs for Lunch or something. That was one of those moments where I feel like he was bringing back the best parts of what he did so well on Holding Hands with Jamie.
Absolutely.
Where like he just articulates like very specific ways that like feeling aware of your own body and aliveness and like being can be just so off-putting and like so uncomfortable, and like I don't know.
He just like me for real. He just like me for real.
Like you hear it in his voice. It's just like the discomfort is just like pulled out of him in such a like intentionally grotesque and like, jagged way. And I think it works so well.
But he also feels so in control of the comedy of it too. Like, just like how he keeps listing them over and over. Like it just has a stacking effect that's just really. Mm-hmm. I also just want to shout out.
It feels like so absurd in such a perfect way.
Yeah. I want to shout out Backwash, which is also a great fucking song. And then I Was Away, which is one of the coolest songs they've ever made, because they talk about in the Pitchfork review that this band, when they first formed, and it's very funny to think about this, they described their original music as like Strokes ripoff music. Like they used to make very kind of like 3-chord sort of whatever, like melodic punk stuff. And the beginning of I Was Away sounds like the band that they used to be. Wait, no,
I think you're thinking of you might be thinking
Soon,
of
the one right after it.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Almost Soon, because Almost Soon is the one I'm gonna play. Almost Soon.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Almost Soon. I was trying to pinpoint which one it is in the track, but it's Almost Soon. That's the one. But no, Almost Soon sounds like an Ott song at the beginning of it. Like it sounds like this very melodic, strokesy, sort of post-punk song.
There's no pedals. It's like it's like wow, oh my god, wow, it's a very pretty. Like clean. It's like a clean guitar tone.
And
then
like, oh wow, what? Like immediately they're like, all right, let's take this and then like turn it inside out and like stick its insides on the outside and make it disgusting and gross. And it's like, it's the evolution of them as a band in one song. It's very cool.
It got incredible again. Incredible track, incredible record. I was really happy this got Best New Music, because I feel like this is a band that I think has been doing consistently great work, and where a lot of their, also just a very influential band. Like I feel like they were way ahead of the curve of like a lot of the windmill scene. I feel like a lot of the windmill scene owes a lot of their success to Gilla Band for like breaking some of those doors down initially, and also they're a lot better than a lot of these windmill bands have become in recent years. I'm looking at you, Black Midi. I'm looking at you. I'm not going to say the band name because Taylor's going to yell at me.
I'm defending Ants.
but I feel like, again, this is a band that, like, whereas bands like Black Midi and Black Country New Road have kind of gone away from their original sound, for better or worse. Gilla Band's just like, hey, we have our own sound. We're just going to keep expanding on it and adding to it. And just like, hey, we have a lane here. We're just going to stick with it and continue to find, new and exciting ways to drive down on it. This is a fantastic record. I love it a lot. Top 10 of the year. Almost Soon. Incredible track. But let's move on to the next record. Jackie, what is our next record?
So I did something that I'm notorious for that Matty hates, is that I put a lot of records on the list and then I sneak one in onto the list at the very last minute, but I almost forgot about it, and it's important to bring up because I'm going to bring them up together and just do two at once, because I have a perfect way to introduce these records, which is through the very dumb meme I came up with. So I'm talking about, of course, the Skullcrusher record, and also by extension the Searows album, which were two sort of late in the year finds for me. The Skullcrusher record, so beautiful. I really, really love this record. Just barely missed my 10. It's like just outside, and in almost any other year would have probably made my 10. But there are things in there that, like, I think there are other records this year that do what this album does, maybe just a tiny bit better. But like, what I really find appealing about this record is my sort of pitch, which is that Skullcrusher is grouper for Phoebe Bridgers fans, but the Searows album is Phoebe Bridgers for grouper fans. It's very different, you see, because Skullcrusher is like ambient music for people that want a little bit more of like a straightforward pop indie folk melody to sort of lean onto. Like it has a little bit more, it's like a little more accessible grouper, but not in a way that I'm saying it all in a demeaning way. Like I do think it does manage to capture that same sort of blend of ambient music and more traditional singing songwriting stuff. And I think there are a lot of really, really memorable moments on the record, even if it's not a record that I quite can pick out like songs individually. It's really like the Skullcrusher record, if I'm listening to it, I'm putting on the whole thing. I'm lighting a candle. Like it is very much like we're constructing a vibe record. Whereas the Searows album is a like songwriting first record. But the Searows album, I got into this very late in the year. I saw Ethel Kane tweeting about it, and then I obviously save it because anytime she's into something, I'm gonna like it. We have the same brain. It's how it is. But my friend Angel, who also has the same brain as me, literally made me listen to this by force when we hung out in person. Like, no, you have to hear this. And this person is going to be so fucking big. Like, T-Boy Phoebe Bridgers is very reductive, but also like that is the vibe. Like, it does have a very Phoebe Ethel sort of thing. But going back to what we were saying about the sort of literal lyricism of some of those artists, it does a really good balance of having like really fuck me up lyrics while not being too literal. It has some really nice metaphors and turns of phrase and imagery that I think helps prevent it from feeling too kind of staid. And I think it's just incredible. If I had a breakup like even remotely recently, this album would be fucking my shit up right now. Like, as I said to Matty, I said be careful with this one because it's not a breakup record. It's a I went through a breakup like 6 months ago and I still feel weird about it album. And so,
I've still not listened to it yet, almost precisely because of that.
This album with caution is what I will tell people. But Keep the Rain is a song that personally attacked me. Coming Clean is a really beautiful song. I think Searows is going to be fucking huge next year. Like, put a pin in that. Like, I really think this has enormous potential. And I really, really like it in a way that I like solo Phoebe, but sometimes it rubs me the wrong way. But I think that this is just like an excellent, excellent record. And then I made that meme about the Phoebe for Grouper fans, Grouper for Phoebe fans thing. And then because saying it out loud made me feel insane, I had to put it in the form of a Walt and Jesse, what the fuck are you talking about meme, which then Searows reposted onto Instagram and said that he loved. So I was very happy about that. But yeah, great record. Shout out to Searows, shout out to Skullcrusher, 2 late in the year albums that I really, really, really love. That are continuing the trend of like quiet, slow, sad music really being able to capture a wider audience because of like really strong songwriting and like relatability. And like this album is just going to soar in the lane that Ethel Cain is further paving for people like this to succeed. And also the Ethel Cain cosign does not hurt.
Yeah. The Skullcrusher album and the Soft Blue Shimmer album actually are two that both that I wish I had gotten into earlier. But also both of them really reminded me of like 90s Love Lies Crushing, like that the self-titled album in like in a really interesting way. I feel like they both kind of nailed down that like very pretty but almost like haunted shoegazy dream poppy sound that's like very atmospheric and like surrounding but never dissipates, like can be background music but never just like completely disappears into the background.
All right, let's move on. We have just a couple of records left. I'll just be real quick on this one. I don't have a lot to say. Special Interest, Endure. This is a record that I liked way more. It was sort of like one of those slingshot things where when you have low expectations for a record, you end up overrating it because you're like, wow, this is pretty good. And then you come back to it and you're like, okay, I've kind of found a happy medium. And that's where I'm at with this record, where I had tried to get into this band before because they have a kind of disproportionate amount of hype. Not disproportionate, like not that it's not deserved, but like critics love this band. Critics really love this band. And I think that could make it easy to eye roll at them because of the way that critics write about them in a way that's kind of corny. And especially like whenever a punk band is doing like political lyrics, like that has a tendency to draw out like bad music writing. And so I get why some people just sort of like sneer at this band, but also like as someone who I read the reviews of this band and seems like they should be my shit, and then the last couple of records before this one I wasn't really able to get into it, but this record totally fucking worked for me. I just really, really I mean not totally, like it trails off a little bit toward the end, but like when it's clicking, this is the most I've ever gotten into Special Interest. And basically because I think they lean more into kind of their dance punk side of their music more so than some of the like post-punky stuff that they've done previously. And I think that like, now I don't love Midnight Legend so much, but Herman's House sounds like evil Hercules and Love Affair. Not to keep making that sort of joke, but like that's the vibes. It's really like dance punk, but given more of a sort of industrial, nasty edge to it. I don't think it's like as special as like the 8.8 Pitchfork review is sort of trying to hype it up to be, but I also like it way more than their last records, and am now curious to sort of check out what they do in the future, because I do really like this. I really like certain songs on this record, particularly the first two. Really,
I think this one started really strong, and then for me, kinda,
it's very front heavy.
Fell off a cliff a little.
I think the shorter songs I think are where they do better, and they have their like they sustain their high energy the whole time. And like I similarly was kind of resistant to them at first because they seemed very like NPR core, like
critic bait,
music writer bait.
What you were saying earlier about sounding like Dave Grohl talking about Wet Leg. That's what it is. Yeah. It's very like rock and roll is alive, and these black women are gonna tell us what's up with politics these days. It's very kind of condescending, almost the way that people write positively about them. Yeah, I kind of felt like I was like, oh, is this just gonna be the like, the tote bag crowds rock album of the year? But I know, I think it's like genuinely fun, and they seem like they'd be a really cool band to see live. I agree. Like I'm sure that's part of how the hype is built for them. Like I imagine you could see them live and be like, oh fuck, this band is sick. Yeah.
Music writers. I got some tips for you. Kill the Rob Shuffle in your head. Kill the Ryan Domble in your head. Kill them both. Get them out of there. Let them die.
Okay. We've had our issues with Ryan on this podcast. Do not lump Ryan Domble in with Rob Sheffield as if they were.
Did you not read the Ice Spice? Fucking no, Jackie. No.
Maddie,
did you not read the Ice Spice?
Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines munch.
Merriam-Webster's dictionary is the worst trope in potentially writing. Period. I hate it so much. But Maddie, even still, do not put him on the same plane as that goblin man, Rob Sheffield. No, absolutely not. That's not fair to Ryan.
I stand by what I said. I stand by it. Kill the Ryan Domble in your head. Kill the Rob Sheffield in your head. Let's move on. Let's move on though to our next record. We have two more left on the docket. The new 100 gecs EP, Snake Eyes. I heard this one for the first time today before this podcast, and I kind of get why Pitchfork panned this one. It made me have a lot of thoughts. So I've been kind of out of the whole. We kind of briefly touched on it with Brakence. I've been very much out of the hyperpop loop for the past couple years. It's just not what has. Definitely like post pandemic.
Yeah.
It had its moment, and I think the pandemic kind of.
Sophie's death is just it fucked everything up.
That too. That's the real big one. But this record, like, it really feels like the curse, I would say, of some of these big hyperpop acts is that when they came out, they were really ahead of the curve and really doing something that like not many people were hearing before. But now, this is coming out, over 3 years, almost 4 years since 1000 gecs. And this record, it really feels like gecs are really behind on the times. It really feels like the movement has really passed them by. And this record, this EP, this is a setup EP, like I said, we'll see how the sound, we'll see how the full 10,000 gecs record sounds, but I think just the singles for that record that we've heard so far and this EP, it really feels like the whole movement has really passed them by, and it really feels like that is the curse of a head of the curve band, is that as soon as they fall behind that curve, it's going to sound way worse than it probably actually is because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the odds are kind of stacked against them too, because it's like it's hard to move beyond like the meme of the band when you are like a meme band that dropped a meme album, which like I love 1000 gecs. I haven't listened to it in a while, but like I feel like listening to their newer stuff, and like I saw them live a little over a year ago, and it was kind of a depressing live show because it was all just like I was like the oldest person there who wasn't like some teenager's dad going with them because they were underage. And it was like, again, like young people coming out of the pandemic and just like having atrocious concert etiquette and like not knowing how to behave in public. But also I was just like, wow, I wish I could go back to 2019 when I was hearing this for the first time and it felt really new and exciting. And there weren't like a million other people trying to poorly replicate it.
Yeah. Like I had a unique experience with gecs, is that like that was my last show before the pandemic, was seeing them in like a hometown show in St. Louis. during Christmas time, and it was just like a great show, and just like, you know, you could feel like things were keeping up, but it was still like a small venue, but it still felt like, hey, this was like a little special thing between, you know, the sort of small group of people, a relatively small group of people. And then obviously, you know, when I saw them last year or 2021, it was at, you know, one of the biggest venues in LA. I think it was Shrine Expo Hall, like a couple thousand people there. It was like, it was crazy, but it was like, man, this just feels like, it was just like, I enjoyed it, but it was definitely vibes were off, and I feel like
it's a little Mitski-esque in the way that like this thing all of a sudden built around them, and now it feels harder for them to sort of naturally do the thing that made people gather around them. But I had a weird arc with this EP because I'm famously not like a huge 100 gecs person, although I will say over time that album and like songs in that album like grew on me more and more and more. Like I saw someone do Stupid Horse at karaoke, and I was like, okay, I get why this song is really fun. Like I had some parts of it, and I also always liked 800 dB Cloud and some other songs, but like Money Machine never worked for me in the way it did for other people seemingly. And while I enjoyed some other stuff that was sort of lazily categorized together under the hyperpop banner as created by Spotify, but like they had a particular style that it wasn't like I was opposed to it in sort of an old fogey way. Like I had a dubstep past, you know, like I am not like scandalized by it, but I just sort of never like got into it in that way. So when this EP came out, I liked it a lot. I actually liked it more than most people seem to, and it's not like I have abandoned that take once I saw that everyone else hates it, but I also sort of get why, if your thing with 100 gecs, if the reason why you liked them was because of how much they were like a shock to the system and were so exciting, I can understand why this EP is really underwhelming. But it's also only 3 songs. Like I think like, it is really just a holdover because of how long it took them to put their album out.
Mm-hmm.
The better parts of this EP, I think, are where they move in a direction that is harsher and like.
Hey, Big Man is the best song on this EP for sure.
Yeah, the parts where that you're like, oh, this is gonna alienate the like white monster TikTok crowd that like got into them around the time of like Glitch Gum getting really big.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also, on my notes, I wrote microphones in 2020 voice, 100 gecs in 2023.
Oh, God.
Like I said,
2019 both feels like not that long ago, but also like 1,000 years ago, not to be too on the nose.
Yes.
1,000
gecs
feels like
ago. A very contained era that's like, I don't know. It feels like cased in amber now and like kind of untouchable.
Like, Stuff that felt culturally relevant at that time feels so far away now, even though it isn't. Mm-hmm. And like we're talking about, like this brakence album is really popping off, and like there are sort of surface level things you can point to that connect them. But like, I really hope that the record is great and that they are able to sort of salvage the sort of not great reception of this EP, but
we're all rooting.
I don't know.
Them.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Again, they're hometown heroes. I gotta stick by them. You know, like it's like it's sad that I have like a negative take on this EP. Like,
well, that's what happened to you, Matty. You had 2 years where St. Louis was at the top with Foxing and with 100 gecs, and then 2 albums in a row.
Damn.
Tough.
Sad day. But our final record, our main event, an album that we arguably should have done a full episode on, a full FYC episode, but again, just came out at a bad time of the year.
On you, and you were just like, nah, but it's fine.
I didn't say no. It's just twice. I just realized, if we want to do it, like we just gotta just do it, get it done quickly. It's a new Weyes Blood record, in the darkness, Hearts Aglow. Can I start on this one? I want to start this one. I want to get my.
I became the person driving the train for this record because I love it so much.
Yeah,
you're the Weyes Blood guy. You were there first with front row seat to Earth. You've been on the train day one.
like I said, I was hip to From Sea to Earth. I thought that was a great record. A record that is still great. I still think it's my favorite Weyes Blood record. I was, on it early. I think, obviously I was on it when it got Best New Music, but I think still people weren't totally hip to it just yet, even though it did get the B&M bump. It was Titanic. I mean, like I said, a lot of things were building, and then Titanic Rising was just sort of this, coronation moment where, it was number one on Indieheads list, got tons of critical acclaim, kind of became the new.
Also, as what we were just talking about with 100 gecs and Mitski and all these people, it's a 2019 record that felt pretty big at the time, but really, really grew and like kept finding more people. That by the time this Weyes Blood album came out, she was a much bigger artist than she was at the time she put out the last one. Because it feels like it just really found, like, you see the Titanic Rising album cover pictures go viral on every social media platform like every 2 weeks. Like the behind the scenes of her underwater in the bedroom is just like that. The people are going to repost those pictures for the end of time. It's but this record.
But this album, I'm a little cold on it still. I don't think it's definitely not bad by any means. But I definitely feel like if this is supposed to be the second album of a trilogy, and it really does feel like the middle act of this, where it's definitely a much more deliberately slower record. It definitely doesn't have the pomp and circumstance. Did I say that? Is that the correct term?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Of Titanic Rising, it definitely feels like sort of a purposely slow burn record. And there's some stuff, and I really do appreciate that, but it also, like, I don't know, like, that's not like that's not what I again it that's not exactly why I came to Weyes Blood, where I feel like she was able to balance the more slow burn moments with sort of more bombastic songwriting. And this is a case where it's just like, oops, all slow burn, which for some people like Jackie, that totally works. And I think I think there's times where I do think that works, but I don't see myself, like, I have not really had a really strong desire to go back to this record like I did for From Sea to Earth and Titanic Rising, where I feel like those are records that were very easy to go back to and really dive in. You feel like you're getting a full adventure, and this is one where it's like it's the unfortunate act of being the middle album of a trilogy, where I feel like whenever that third record comes out, this record might unlock itself to me a little bit more once I have the context of that third record. Potentially.
I disagree so much. I think that this record is so much better than Titanic Rising to me. I like Titanic Rising. I like Front Row Seat to Earth more than Titanic Rising. I felt like Front Row Seat to Earth is a great record, and Titanic Rising was like making that really big and really bombastic. And like there are some awesome songs on Titanic Rising. Like Every Day is an incredible song. I think the title track is great. I think Movies is like one of her best songs, like amazing. But like Andromeda being the great example, or like A Lot's Gonna Change, like these really big, epic sort of ballads that are nice, but just sort of feel like they flatten a little bit the appeal of Weyes Blood for me, just turning her into sort of a Jonathan Rado sort of just thing. And like obviously Rado's back on this record, and as I've said, I'm tired of the Laurel Canyon folk sound, but Weyes Blood is allowed to do it because she's better at it than everyone else. But also, true. I think this record is just so fucking deep and complex, and there's so much going on right under the surface of this very plain spoken songwriting. I wrote the blurb about it for the merry-go-round list and for the Indieheads list, but like, I don't know, like this is a record I haven't spent like a ton of time listening to it, but part of that is because it's just really fucking hits, and it's heavy for me, and I think it's just really like, I don't know, I spent so much time thinking about it and just like pondering it, and it really I think is her most interesting record as a songwriter, and that's part of why I'm not feeling the slow burn. It's like with the Epicane album, right? Like if you're really locked into like, oh my god, I love what she's doing here songwriting wise, then the slowness of it just doesn't even really show up. But I do get what you mean. Like it maybe needs something to sort of just break up that pacing a little bit, but like I really can't find anything about this record to change or edit or remove or like wish was a little stronger. Like I think like Hearts Aglow is probably my least favorite song on the record, and it's like still pretty great. Like I think God Turned Me Into a Flower is a fucking stunning song, like maybe your best song ever, with the help of Dan Lopatin, and like the least corny use of nature sounds on an album I've maybe ever heard. Like it
I feel like
it totally
she gets away with the whole like flower child
100%. No, yeah, it's
a lot better than
woo-woo-y shit, and like could have been solar power so easily, and totally pulls it off because it feels genuine, like the real like we're all one fluid mass linked by love, that sort of like Wachowski like we're all one thing, man. Like she pulls that off so well because it's not
when she says it, it feels genuine, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like just like stupid like college freshman who took one philosophy class and did shrooms once. Like I feel like she gets away with it. And I can understand why like it would be off-putting to someone who's not like ready to commit to that whole vibe that she brings to the table. I don't know. I also like, I feel like I'm kind of torn when music writers or like people in general will talk about Weyes Blood's music as though she's like constantly making some big sweeping statement about humanity and the times we're living in, because I feel like that's every single review of every Weyes Blood album. It's like, you know, we're in a constant flux, we're in an era of change, like, and she's the voice behind all of that. And I feel like what really draws me to like the best of her music is when the moments that feel super intimate and I don't want to say like personal or confessional, but like the ones where it doesn't feel like she's like, you know, and I'm not saying that she's trying to make those big sweeping statements, but I think that's why I liked Titanic Rising so much, was because that album has like a certain closeness to it, and a certain intimacy. And I mean, I don't know, I think with this new album, I feel like it starts and ends really strong, and like that's enough to carry me through. But I don't think that like the middle section is, you know, I can see why it wouldn't be like compelling enough to everyone.
Yeah, there's a lot of me bait in the middle section. Like Grapevine is the most Lana Del Rey song she's ever made. God Turned Me Into a Flower. You've got Danny Lopatin on there. That's more me bait. Twin Flame is like her doing a kind of Cocteau Twinsy, like, and
I like Twin Flame a lot.
I love
one of my favorite
that's a really
songs
great
on the
song.
record.
But like all of those songs in the middle there are very much speaking my language. Besides Hearts Aglow is the only one that feels a little just like more of the same, I guess. But that's like, even then, it's a good song that like I can enjoy a lot on its own terms. But
I think it's like a blessing and a curse that the first and last song are my favorite ones on the album.
I think that's fair, but I also I like you're saying, it starts so strong and ends so strong that is a lot of what carries me through the sort of pacing of it. And I think that I am unfortunately one of those music journalists, but I also like, the thing I love about this record is it's basically, this is the pandemic record that makes it such that we don't need to do pandemic records. We're done with them. They were never good, but this is the only one that should exist because it's not at all pretentious. Like, it is addressing those sort of things, but it's not addressing them in the way that the writers who are writing about it are, because it's not sweeping statements. It's these really
it doesn't feel heavy-handed,
plain-spoken observations. And like, that's the genius of It's Not Just Me, It's Everybody, is that it is this really big picture, like we're all going through this great struggle, and like we all need to recognize that we're all the same people. Like that very like big heady woo-woo-y thing, but it starts with I'm a girl at a party and I feel kind of alone right now. And like that is a microcosm for the really big thing, but she doesn't front load it with the philosophy. Rather, she uses very relatable, very everyday, very plain spoken. And that's why I think it does such a good job of addressing the pandemic, because it's the only album I've heard that is not beating around the bush, that is not trying to come up with some like elaborate metaphor for like we're all in this prison and it's whatever. It's just like it's been a long, strange year and everybody's sad. They lost what they thought they had. Like she just says the stuff that we've all been sort of thinking, but we sort of don't acknowledge because it feels sort of trite or it feels like too obvious. And she has a way of reflecting those obvious sentiments and making them feel obvious in a way. It's like it's obvious because it's true. And that really comes back with the last song on the record, A Given Thing, which is my favorite. Actually, God Turned Me Into Flower is probably my favorite, but A Given Thing, I think, is one of her best songs ever because it ties in the big picture stuff and also the romance, love stuff of the record all into this one idea that basically is like her version of Bjork's Undo. Like love doesn't have to destroy you anymore. Like love is a given thing. It's natural. It comes for you. And it sounds boring and trite and cliche because it is the answer. Like that's why it sounds too obvious. It's because it is correct. Like love is the only answer. Love is the only solution. It's not a one-way street. We've got to all it flows out of me too. Love everlasting. Like all that shit. Like it's really beautiful. It's really, really, really moving.
Yeah, the first time I heard that song, I was like, I need to sit down 100%. For a minute. It was very like
it's a doozy.
It was very like Lady Bird. Let's just sit with what we heard.
Totally.
But I feel like you summed up something really essential about her songwriting that's like been consistent across all her records, where she's able to say things that feel deeply personal and deeply universal at the same time. Totally. And I don't know, I think like this is a pandemic record that doesn't necessarily have to be a pandemic record.
Yeah.
Because it's also a record that's just about like, you know, it seems so stupid, but it's like about like being a person who is alive on planet Earth, which is like a very dumb way to put it. But it's not just me, it's everybody. Like I'm like, yeah, that song could be about anything. Like but it's still so specific and it still maintains like such a sharpness and like a, you know,
The Worst Is Done is the only song that really feels super specific to that.
Yeah.
But I think The Worst Is Done is part of why I love this record so much, because it does manage to like address it in a way that feels very like there are so many lines on that record that just got kind of old, happened to me quickly. What the fuck? You're not allowed to say that, Natalie. Like just Jesus Christ. That is awful. I love that song, but I hate that song.
She was really right when she said that she was looking at all our posts and not saying anything.
Oh my god! Also, one of the most tweets ever made.
But I do love that like this record is very in a way that's somewhat like it is grappling with these like society, like these big sort of heavy weighty things on all of us, but it is also very different than Titanic Rising, which is an album that feels like, oh god, it feels like there's this big unsteady thing on the horizon and it's scary. And this album is like, okay, well, we're here, it's happening. There's no point in like sounding the alarms anymore. She's like, this album is about finding an escape hatch from the despair, is like trying to figure out how do we start to put ourselves back together again, how do we go walk out and see who we've become, as she says on The Worst Is Done, like that feeling. And I think that this record just really fucking spoke to me, and will continue to be an album that I revisit.
Yeah. Alrighty. I think that any final thoughts? I feel like we can wrap
there was
this
one thing
up.
I realized at the very end of this episode was technically a Q4 release because it came out on October 1st. But the shout out to the Wulven album. That's another.
I was gonna say I forgot to. Yeah, I was gonna mention. I forgot. I should have teed you up for that one or threw that in the doc. It's
fine. I just completely forgot about it because I got into it later in the year and I thought it had come out earlier in the year, and it had, but it wasn't like that earlier in the year. But I want to shout it out because it is one of my favorite albums of the year. Wulven. The album is called I Have Seen the End and It Is Beautiful. He is a musician from Tennessee, I believe is where he's from. And he makes just doomer music, like 100% doomer music. Like the Funcer should sign this guy tomorrow. because he is basically synthesizing early 2010s doomer music and late 2010s doomer music into like its own unique concoction. It's basically like what if Spooky Black made a Have a Nice Life album is the pitch I've given people. It's like very moany, kind of ambient, kind of doom metal-y, spooky. There's a song on this album called "We Were All Just Skeletons," and it was very funny because I was playing this album in the office, and they're like, "Ooh, what's this song called? Like spooky, whatever." And I'm like, basically, like you're not that far off. But yeah, there's a song on this album called "Doomgaze Socialism." Like that's all you need to know about it. Like it's just a very on-brand record for me and for Hayden to be into, but also so good. Like I really loved it right away, and anyone who is into vaguely Flenser adjacent stuff, you should listen to the Wulven album and listen to his other stuff too. He put out 2 records last year and a record the year before, and is working on new music that sounds even heavier and more post-metal-y. So I'm very excited to see what's next up for Wulven. But yeah, that was my last thing. I promise I'm done now.
All right, let's wrap it up. Taylor, Grace, thank you both so much for coming on the pod.
Thanks,
anything y'all want to plug before we head out?
You can look at my blog, Swim Into the Sound. I just interviewed the guy from Tap Music, if that's interesting to anyone.
Yes, that was the nerd shit that appealed to me specifically.
Yeah,
I am the dork target audience.
Exactly. If you understand what I said, then you'll probably like it. But yeah, I just write about emo music, so check it out.
And Grace, anything?
I'm on Twitter at Grace_Rosso. Have not put out anything in a couple months because I just started grad school. But I do have a few pieces coming out in the next couple months. So something coming out in the next couple weeks, which I'll be posting about. But yeah, that's all.
All righty. Well, folks, we will see y'all next week. As let me make sure I got the right episode on the docket. Next week, we return to Matty Trauma Zone as I present my Rap Forum Veterans playlist.
Oh God, that's next week.
Songs from the rap.
Oh wow,
that is next week. Oh boy, so that's going to be a fun one, folks. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.
It's a given thing.